Good morning. I'm President Ted Carter. I'm the 8th president at the University of Nebraska. And it's great to be with you. I hope many Nebraskans are dialing in to see this special announcement. As I've been the president here at the University of Nebraska now, going on my 4th month, this is my first press conference. And I'm looking forward to sharing some special news with all Nebraskans today. As many of us have lived in unprecedented times, a phrase that's been used all too often, there's some things that all of us are in great need of these days, a little extra hope and some predictability. And as the mission of the University of Nebraska is to provide education for the future workforce of Nebraska, everything that we're focused on right now is about affordability and accessibility. So today I'm pleased to announce that we intend to freeze our tuition rates for the University of Nebraska for 2 years. Now, we have not done this type of move in recent history. To give you some exacts on that, we're talking about academic years 2021 going into 22, as well as academic year 22 going into 23. This will be affected for all students and all programs. So whether you are a Nebraskan student, an out-of-state student, whether you are on the campus, or whether you're an online or remote learner, we intend to freeze tuition for 2 years. This also applies to all differential programs, all programs at the undergraduate, graduate level, and PhD. Now, this rather unprecedented move serves a purpose for giving some predictability and holding faith with our principal constituents for whom we serve, and that is our students. So if you ask why are we doing this now, I would just tell you that COVID-19 is affecting all of us. We all know we're going to come through this at some point. Our economy will recover as we're looking at an over 4% unemployment rate here in the state of Nebraska now, when we've been used to about an unemployment rate of less than 2%. And when that comes back, we need to make sure that we have an educated workforce ready to go to work and grow our economy. Now, I would like to take a moment to just review some of the programs that we've announced at the University of Nebraska recently, in case you haven't been hearing that or paying attention. The first was one about 3 weeks ago, where we expanded a program called College Bound Nebraska. These were for students in financial need that typically would receive some amount or complete Pell Grants. And we expanded that program that we now call Nebraska Promise. These are for qualified Nebraska state residents whose family earns $60,000 adjusted gross income or less. For those that qualify, it's a free tuition to attend any of our 3 main undergraduate campuses. We've had tremendous response to that. We saw over 1,000 applications in just the course of a little over a week, so we've been very proud of that response. The second thing that we did a little over a week ago was state our intention to be open in the fall. As many know, all of education has gone to remote education through the spring semester, as well as what we're doing for the summer semester. But a big question across major college campuses or across the nation is whether or not they'll be open in the fall. And we have every intention of being open. And of course, we're not doing that just on a wish. We're doing that with science, with data, with logic, some common sense, and our friends at the University of Nebraska Medical Center, as well as the Global Center for Health Security, who helped us develop a playbook, a very extensive 19-page checklist for how to safely open up our campuses. Now, I'll just share with you a little bit of extra detail, because that type of health and security is going to be very important for our students who are making a decision about whether or not to come back to campus this fall. We are expecting to have much more widespread testing, antibody testing, dashboards that will give us real-time information on what the acceleration or deceleration of any of the diseases that could be affecting our campuses. And we are going to be spreading ourselves out. We will not look like we have in the past, but we will still take the advantage of what it means to be on campus for that experiential education. So we'll be doing better use of our classrooms, we'll look at class sizes, and yes, there might even still be some need for remote education where it best applies. And of course, we're not going to force anybody to come to campus, and that includes students or faculty. So there will still be a plethora of online education, remote education for those who feel that's important. And of course, today, this announcement about a 2-year tuition freeze. Now, those that are wondering, who's paying for all that? How does this happen? Nebraska Promise has a price tag to it. Even a tuition freeze will be a reduction in some amount of revenues. For those that are following us, we plan to put out a very detailed plan about our finances at our Board of Regents meeting in June. But let me just say this. For those that are wondering how we can afford this, I would tell you we can't afford not to do this. This is about making sure that we keep that special trust and confidence with our families, with our students, whether they are current students or future students, because it's all about making sure that we have students to teach and go into the workforce. I want to just talk a little bit about what's happening in higher education across the nation. As I pay attention to what some of our peer institutes are doing and what's happening in trends, we're not probably immune from some of these things here in Nebraska. Higher education has had to shift. Everyone's gone to remote education. Some have done it better than others. And students are already telling us that they're kind of tired of remote and online education. In fact, 3 out of 4 college-bound students say they don't really want to go back to an online education, and we're hearing that. The other trend is we're hearing that students are interested in really kind of 3 big things. First, they want to know, what's the cost of education? What is it going to cost me to go to college? And what is my debt going to be when I finish, when I get my degree? The second thing they're asking is, what kind of capability is every campus going to have for physical and mental health, and how will I feel secure if I go to that campus? And the third is, when I finish my program, whether it be undergraduate or graduate program, what kind of job and job security do I have afterwards? I want to tell everybody that's listening that we here at the University of Nebraska are focused on these 3 things. In fact, I call this the pivot to a refocused mission of education. And institutions that are not ready to make this pivot, are not ready to go to that and understand those 3 big questions, they're likely to become less relevant and maybe even in trouble of sustaining themselves. Some of the other trends that we're hearing about in higher education through the American Council of Education is many large-scale public and private institutions are thinking that they're going to have a 15% or even a 20% drop in enrollment. Now, we here at the University of Nebraska are very blessed that we have about 80% of all college-bound students that come to our campuses. About half of that population, about 12,000 Nebraskans annually, choose to come to the University of Nebraska. We want to make sure that we maintain that. We want to make sure that we talk to that audience and make sure that they feel welcome. Some students are wondering now whether or not they want to travel out of state, or maybe even thinking about their choice to include whether they go somewhere else or even take a gap year. For those that are really seriously thinking about a gap year, let me just offer a couple of thoughts. First of all, typical gap years imply maybe some international travel, some domestic travel, maybe going into the workforce, or maybe some significant volunteering. You know, when you get an undergraduate degree from the University of Nebraska, you're going to see about $750,000 to $1 million of lifetime extra earnings for those that didn't get a college degree. Do you want to wait for that to start happening with the gap year? And if you are seriously thinking about that, you might want to even think about what some of the online programs are. We're going to continue to have robust online programs. As I said, those tuition prices will be frozen going forward. As I wrap up here and be ready to take some questions, I just want to summarize by saying we are going to be open. We're going to be transparent in how we're doing our business. We're going to be affordable and accessible for all Nebraskans. You know, a lot of people have asked me after serving 38 years in the Navy whether I've seen anything of a crisis like this in my lifetime, and I have to say I really haven't. In fact, if you look at the big events in history going all the way back to the Civil War, going back to the turn of the century, our world wars, Great Depression, even events of 9/11 and the Great Recession of 2008, we are living in a time unlike any other. And in fact, I'm reminded of a man who was responsible really for bringing the start of our United States Navy in 1777, Captain John Paul Jones. He was really the man responsible for creating the United States as a maritime nation. And as they were having trouble recruiting young men to go to sea, he started a recruiting effort going throughout the cities, through all over New England, Rhode Island, Massachusetts. and he just had a very simple message: sign on, come sail with me. It reminds me that we might be in a similar time. Even though we don't have an enemy at the sea to fight, we now have an invisible enemy that we have to deal with. So my message to all Nebraskans, our current students, our future students, is really simple. Sign on, come to Nebraska, stay in Nebraska, come live, work, grow, and learn with me at the University of Nebraska. Thank you all very, very much, and I'm ready to take some questions. Yes?
Do you have any idea of how much revenue loss you may incur?
Yeah, we don't have all of that laid out. We do believe that we have, and we've stated this publicly, that we've lost about $50 million in lost revenues through the course of this fiscal year. We've made some, stated efforts to offset that by hiring freezes, restricting travel, large-scale buys. All of the campuses have been asked to save 3% of their budget going into the fourth quarter, which is something that we're achieving, and we're doing a review of all large-scale projects. We know there'll be some other economic impact. We are going through detailed planning, and that's all I'm ready to say about that right now. And we'll be able to absorb these other costs that will be self-inflicted. And we do not intend to ask the unicameral, the legislature, for more additional money to offset these programs that we're instituting. We believe they're important enough for us to do internally. Well, again, I'm not going to go into any of those details today, but we are doing all due diligence and planning. So more details on that when we announce our future budget here in June.
Do you have any early indication on what your fall enrollment will be?
So I will just tell you that we did believe we had about a 5% gap when we opened up Nebraska Promise. Most of that gap was closed. But I will say this right now, that applications and even deposits for coming to the fall, none of those are a guarantee that students will actually show up. This is that decision space. We moved those final decisions from 1 May to 1 June. This is a moment where every faculty member, every staff, our Board of Regents, everyone, it's an all hands on deck effort to talk to our fellow Nebraskans about the importance of education, why the University of Nebraska program matters so much, our focus on cost, value, the health and mental health capability, and the fact that when you come here, internships and jobs are going to be made an opportunity. That's a priority for us. So this is that moment in time where we really have to make a good effort to make sure that our enrollment numbers stay flat, that we do not become part of that statistic of a 15% enrollment drop. I think we're going to be different than other states because of our unique place here in Nebraska.
What's the tuition increase percentage that the regions have already approved for 2021, and will that continue to take effect?
So there's a lot of... Yeah, so the question was, what was the percent tuition increase that had already been previously approved by the Board of Regents? As a lot of you know, that was well before the time that I came here. It's a 2.75% in-state tuition increase and a 1% out-of-state tuition increase. That is already baked into this year. A lot of people have wondered whether or not we would raise that increase given the economic situation, and we've put a freeze on that, as well as the freeze going 2 years forward. Previously approved before I came here, correct. Any other questions maybe from somebody that's remote?
I've got a question from 1011. When was the last time the university did the tuition freeze? Repeat the question.
Yeah, so the question is, when is the last time the university did a tuition freeze? And we did a little history and research on this. At first we thought this might be the first ever, but we have data that shows that there was a tuition freeze in 1973 and 1974. I don't have the background on why that was, but as I said, in modern times, this is rather unprecedented. And you will find very few college campuses, if any, across the country that have put out a 2-year tuition freeze.
In the Journal Star, if you look at the past 5 years, what is a typical, what tuition increase has been looking like at the university?
Yeah, if you go back over the last 5 years, we have typically been raising tuition 3%. If you go back to the recession period of 2008, 2009, we were in double-digit tuition hikes. And normally in a recession, higher ed is often sometimes seen as a winner, where a lot of students and young people who may not go into the workforce will go to college. This is not lost on us that we are in a different time. Nebraskans have already suffered through floods and now COVID-19. We're being very respectful of the challenges economically that are impacting every family. And that's why we want to make our system, our college campus experience, as affordable and accessible as it can possibly be.
How many other Big Ten universities are doing this? How many other universities, major universities are doing this concept?
The question is, how many other major campuses, to include the Big Ten, are doing something similar? There are a number of campuses putting a tuition freeze for the next fiscal year. I've heard very little talk about a tuition freeze over the next couple years. As a lot of people know, Purdue has been holding on to a tuition freeze for a number of years. But again, if you were to compare our University of Nebraska at Lincoln tuition price point, we are the lowest, and I tell you, the best value of any of our Big Ten counterparts. So we're already there. What I have introduced here today between Nebraska Promise, the plans to be open in the fall for that predictability, as well as now the 2-year tuition freeze, I think puts us in a unique place in any of the Big Ten campuses, and quite honestly, anywhere here in the country. Another remote question?
Yep, I got one from KFR. Will the current changes in the financial outlook force a delay or reconsideration of any major capital projects, including the athletic department?
So all I would say is yes, the question is, will this financial situation and where we are cause a delay in any of the big projects, whether they be buildings, athletic fields, to include the Go Big project or the big athletic facility at the Memorial Stadium? And the answer is all of them are under review. We have not dictated any that go specifically on hold, but and I'm not making any special announcements today, but every large-scale project is under review.
You know, I hate to harp on this, but how much does football and sports revenue play into your financial stability?
Well, the question is, how much does football and sports play into our overall revenue? For the campus at Lincoln, obviously Husker Athletics is run almost independently. There are no taxpayer dollars that really go into supporting that program. It runs independent. It's one of the few in the country that actually produces money. We've seen a $10 million benefit from Husker Athletics almost every year. I can't predict right now what that will look like, because we don't know what NCAA athletics, Big Ten competition, as well as the Summit League at Omaha, our Division II competition at Kearney. We don't know what that looks like yet. I'm optimistic for sports going into the fall, but I'm not the driver on that. What I do know is that we plan to be open, we plan to have students on campus, and we want to make sure that they feel comfortable, they feel safe, they feel welcome, and that we've done everything we can to make our fantastic education affordable.
I know it varies by program and maybe it varies by campus as well, but is there any meaningful dollar figure you can put on per credit hour or something, the level at which it's going to be?
We will push those details out at our June meeting, what the exact cost per credit hour are. I will tell you that we are taking a review of some of our online cost per credit hours, so I don't want to get out in front of that detail. You're probably aware that we had reduced some of those costs for the summer programs, and we've seen a fairly significant uptick in those that have signed on for summer remote education, especially at Lincoln and Omaha, to the point of almost 1.5 to 30% increases in online signups for the summer, which is very promising.
And you have some dorms that are currently being used as convalescent dorms and things like that, and respite dorms. I mean, does that contract run out? How will you do that if this prolongs into the summer and into the fall?
Yeah, we're working that planning detail. Yeah, the question is about whether or not our dorms, some of which have some people being used for quarantine, some are first responders and others, how will we transition that situation to students, that contract that exists? Clearly, we will transition. That detail is being worked out through special teams on every campus. Those dorms will be specially cleaned and make sure that they're ready. We're planning to spread out students in the dorms to the greatest extent possible. A lot of our dorms will have single students to a room where we can. We have the luxury of space and geography here in Nebraska. We're going to take the best advantage of that we can. Any other questions? All right, thank you all very much.